Okay, we've reached level 10. Um, it was relatively quick. It only took a couple of hours real life gameplay to get to this point. And this is going to be episode 2 in this series of Dot Hack Fragment New Game Plus, where we're taking a look at the Wavemaster Dionysius as I go ahead with some gear that I ground from my previous playthrough, and I'm going to go ahead and take this character from 1 to 99 and sort of show you the process I'm taking along the way. Obviously, this isn't a 100% must do it this way, but this is the way I've personally found to do it, and hopefully this gives you some inspiration or guidance along the way if you're looking for such things. This episode, we're going to try covering levels 10 to 25, and last one was really more of a straightforward setup, more of a this is the way to look at it guide. This time we're going to get more into the weeds, we're going to be a bit more granular with our approach, and we're going to be a bit more into the off to the side stuff, a bit less direct. But without further ado, let's log in and get rolling. First thing I would suggest, once you get to level 10, is start looking for weapons. By now you've been able to run quite a few different areas and whatnot. You've had a chance to go both online and offline, maybe do some offline NPC trading. But by level 10, that fair amount of elemental staves you've had, you could see I'm still with the air wand here, it's really going to start seeming a little lacking. And you should have an SP pool starting to build up here. If you look at the status I've built, we've got fairly decent stats here. Really good, but a good part of the heavy lifting is done by our armor. The air wand isn't bringing us a whole ton of value anymore at 4 magic attack and 6 magic accuracy. The level 1 ROM spell was vital for me, just locking multiple enemies in place out of the portal there. So we're going to look at some upgrade options. There are other options out there. These are just a few I wanted to point out. The first is the Diabolic Wand, which actually has terrible stats. It's only giving 2 magic attack and 2 magic accuracy. It's not hurting you in any elemental resistances. But the big thing is the attacks. It's actually as early on a weapon as you could get with an elemental summons, which is going to be a huge damage spell. It's also a considerable cost in mana. I believe it's somewhere around the ep.50 SP pool. So that's really only going to be for higher SP builds as we get into the second phase of leveling. It also offers the option of Mule, which is a charm ability, and that is fantastic for crowd control. Also worth noting, 2 very important points that I've covered in previous videos about the charm, but it's sort of vital to point out here. 1, if you charm an enemy that is on its lonesome, no other enemies around, it will attack itself, as opposed to when you're confused and there's no other targets, and you just kind of stand there until the status goes out. Now, that in itself is cool, an enemy damaging itself for a short amount of time, allowing you to recover or maybe get some extra damage in on top of the chip. But where this really comes in handy is if you run into enemies like the Nobunaga Soul with the Death Touch effect. There is a chance that death proc happens. So an enemy could take out a massive chunk of its hit points due to charm on its own. Definitely a strong consideration, but you have to make sure your SP pool can handle this. This is going to be a mage soul drainer. Aedeon's Rod is also a darkness element staff. This one is the true blue in the sense that it's going to boost your darkness element by 10, which is going to help its attacks, but it's also going to really put a hurting on your elemental resistance to light effect, light element. So you may want to avoid those thunder fields, the machine type fields, if this is what you're going to main. Otherwise, it's going to be a high risk, high reward thing because you could one shot a bunch of things with elemental damage, but they're going to hit you for a chunk if they get in. Where this one sort of shines is the level 1 Dawn attack and the level 2 Cruise attack. It gives you some options, it gives you a nice variety and starts you into that progression to level 2 spells. The Annie-Dawn would probably be my preference because they're both just one shot. They either hit or they don't, but the Annie-Dawn spell has a chance for splash damage. You also get a nice 8 magical accuracy here, though the magic attack of 4, again, it's similar to what we had out of the Air Wand, which isn't terribly surprising because these are all fairly similar in level, but there is better out there. The Groovy Stick is another one I want to point out. It's a bit higher up, but I believe it's one you could buy in a root town. I think Mac Anu has it. The stats are already leaps and bounds better. You're not getting anything from the elemental resistances, which to me is as much of a pro as anything, because that means it's also not inhibiting any elemental resistances. You get a physical attack power here, which is icing on the cake if you need it. But look at these magical stats. You're up to 7 in magic attack, 10 in magical accuracy, and you're getting a +5 in defense and evasion. It's really going to make the caster excel in those battles with like wisps and shining eyes, more evasive enemies that may stay at a range and hit you with spells. Another huge thing it does, like the Adean's Rod, is gives you a level 1 and level 2 spell, but here you get different elements. You get Rue Zot for a water attack. The Zot spells are the ones that sort of come up from the ground, so you'll see some ice shards coming up out of the ground there. And Rejuke Zot is going to raise some trees. It's a level 2, so it's a 2-hit attack. But having some elemental versatility will allow you to be far more well-rounded and, again, double your chances of an elemental favorable matchup. All of these are very useful staves and very attainable. However, and this is where I'm going to start getting granular as far as the overall playing of .hack Fragment, and not so much specifically with your Wave Master. Remember, when you make a file for Fragment, you have 3 character slots on that card. Whether you're playing on a physical PS2 or even through the emulator, there's a default setting for 2 memory card slots. So you could potentially have 6 characters at the ready without having to swap cards in and out of the system. And that means you could be leveling up another class, which means if you get to a certain point, I believe if it's around the area where you can sort of handle level 30 fields, and find yourself a Phoenix Queen, they could be data drained for Dark History, which is a lower level rare staff, and it kind of matches up perfectly for Dionysius. You have the level 1, level 2 stuff, it's water element on the staff, but we're not only neutral on elemental affinities, we're actually getting a +3 bump from them. And these stats, for a level 14 rare, that's only 2 levels higher than what we saw out of the Groovy Stick, are out of this world. You're not getting any defensive buffs here, and you're not getting any physical buffs, but 22 magical attack and 25 magical accuracy. Dionysius is attuned to water element via character creation, as we saw through the last episode. If you get a chance, check out .hack Network's blog. I believe it's .hack.org. They have a fantastic breakdown of the hidden stats in character creation. I'll make sure to link that article in the description. But Erroneous really put up some useful tables to check out in that article. And yeah, it gives you a +2 affinity to your element of choice. So we already are leaning a bit into the water element. As you could see here, it's going to take the stats through the roof for us. And that's what we're going to be running with here at level 10. Also, little devil skull guy. Seems to have a ball in his mouth. Maybe that's another skull. Let me get into the light here. It's an eyeball. Okay. It's an eyeball. So I'm just going to deposit these other ones in the stash, because again, they may come handy later. I'm a big fan of sort of keeping a nice weapon cache, but that's really for late game. If you do run for a rare item with another character, there are a variety of options you could use to sort of transfer it. I'll hit into that briefly here, probably insert it right about here. Okay, so we're in the FC Hucker program, or F Chucker as I call it. I'm not sure the correct pronunciation. I never really cared enough to ask. This was all the work of NC Dyson on the Netslum Discord. I believe he's been around since they've been around. I don't know them personally, so I shouldn't make any broad assumptions here. But I don't know Dyson personally. I just know they've been around for a number of years, I think dating back into the Coldbird era. And you can see this just brings up your active 2 memory cards. Obviously, this is something you have to do on the computer with an emulator. There are ways to sort of swap your save files from a PlayStation memory card to a computer back and forth. I'm sure there are guides out there for it. I've never done it personally, and I'm not comfortable enough technologically to try and guide you through it. However, you can see we've got a character select up here for a source. That's going to be the items you're trading away, and the destination will be the character it's going to. So we pulled actually 2 really useful items for a heavy blade, and I'm just going to be switching them to Magnus, a heavy blade I started on slot 2 for the sake of just playing a new character for a little while. You hit start from here, and it's going to bring up your inventory sheet, and this is going to cover everything you have active on you and everything you have in your storage. So as you can see, we've got a fair bit of wands and really nothing else for Dionysius. Actually, this is a crazy amount of wands now that I think about it. "20 unique ones plus the one equipped." So Dionysius already up to 21 wands, giving Repkosai a run for his money on weapons stashed. I believe the Torda sword for Repkosai is up to 38 unique weapons. So, but we're going to go into the equipment here, and just pressing left or right. Left is going to choose back from the max amount down, and right is going to go from 1 ascending. You choose the amount of items you want to send, and then just press X to transfer. It'll give you a quick little confirmation of that. There you can see Magnus has received 1. He had inventory space available, so it went to the inventory. If Magnus was at 40 items, it would instead go to his stash, as would anything that would be overflow. Say I was trying to trade him 99 fortune wires and he already had 10. 89 would go into his inventory and 10 would go to storage. We're also going to trade this fire lizard over, so you can do multiple items at a time. If you hit the triangle button, it will allow you to trade gold. So we're going to go ahead and throw him a quick 1,000. That won't give you a confirmation, but if you look up at the gold pieces, it did transfer down. When you get done with your transaction, you want to hit the start button, as you can see right down there. Start will save the changes in return, and select will discard them in case you had second thoughts or accidentally sent something you didn't want to send. I'm going to start here, and that's going to save the card. I will tell you, I've had instances in the past where I've gone a bit trade crazy here, trying to transfer items from characters back and forth and make three-way trades with items. And I find if you do more than one transaction at a time, there is a chance that the program locks up, freezes, or closes, and any items that were in that transaction at the time in transit will just be lost forever from all characters. It is a hiccup to sort of keep in mind. I don't know if there's any way to avoid it. The best thing I could tell you is after each and every transaction, make sure you save up, and then I close out, and if I'm going to do it again, I just start it again. From the emulator file, you want to run the ELF file, and I will have a link to the GitHub page in the description as well for this program. And there you can see it is brought up once again. Obviously the menu and everything didn't show in the video, but you can see the file once again brought up. And if I wanted to trade again, go Magnus over to Dionysius, and I could just trade that 1,000 back. And it's that simple a program to use. Another thing you may want to look at here is Spring of Mist. Always a risk out in the field here. If you know your weather patterns, you can upgrade things real quick. Or at least have a shot at some items that you wouldn't normally be able to obtain. I'm going to throw in the highest level piece of armor I can get out of my current inventory. It's a level 23 heavy armor. I can't use it either way, and I'm going to choose neither for the option with Grandpa. Now, if you choose a golden axe or a silver axe, you will get that corresponding type back, of axe back, and those are items that could be used in offline NPC trade for some really choice gear. Knowing the weather patterns will affect items. You can upgrade weapons in sunny fields. Rainy fields, I believe, boost armor. And there we got Ranger's boots back, which is a level 27. We still can't use it as a Wave Master, but that's going to sell for even more gold. Just something quick I wanted to bump in and show here. Again, you want to be careful here, because wandering monsters are a real thing. But anyway, back to the video proper. And now that we've covered that, let's go ahead and start looking at dungeons to run. Now, like I said, we're up to level 10. We've got a fair amount of stats at our advantage. But the first thing I want you to do, aside from setting your shortcuts like I was about to forget, go ahead and get that set up. I'm still not too crazy about setting skills that are going to absolutely wipe my S-people, sorry. But I will start setting up some of these other ones here just to get things evened out. So I've got 4 spells loaded, but I'm really going to stick to Ru-Rom and Meruzat if I can for mana efficiency. Another thing I want to do is take a look at what my character is going to need at this point as far as items go, and this is really where I recommend buying blood items to fill out your buff sheet. Taking a look at my status page, I'm more than comfortable with my magical stats being where they're at, but physical defense is going to be my Achilles heel just in this class. So I'm going to look for some Knight's Bloods, and I'm going to get 99. Obviously, your gold stash is going to depend on your level grinding and whatnot, but again, there is a way you could just transfer them later, if need be. So let's go ahead, set that up. I'm leaving L1 and triangle open until I get my SP pool a little higher for foul rep. I've only got 55 SP at the moment, so setting it now is kind of pointless. And it is going to drain me, but a full heal is one of those exceptions I will make for that. But we're going to set our Knight's Blood, that way we can get a physical defense boost along with our regenerations. Now before we go into the power leveling here, which we are going to get to at some extent, because especially if you have a wand that's going to suit your playstyle and give you bonkers stats like these, you could really start pushing the envelope. But I would suggest instead you take a little time out and you appreciate some of the gems of this game, really see sort of some of the charm. There are some custom dungeons and areas throughout. A huge portion of them are the farming dungeons you find in Crab Server and Bearcat Server, where you can find specific enemies that'll allow manipulation of the experience tables to have the best chance possible to pull specific rare items. Those have been tested and documented, and you really have to thank folks like Crab General for coming up with that concept back when this was a live server, Overmaster, who's the current server host for Crab Server, and Samantha Blackrose, host of the Bearcat server, for their diligence on all of these things. We are here in Shining Darkness with server host Imuse, who has been an absolute cornerstone of the community, who has some custom dungeons of a slightly different flavor. Actually, it's a lot of lore built into this server itself. So I would suggest you go down through this absolutely ridiculous list of keywords and find the words for the custom servers. One I would suggest right away is Under the Moon. I think it's only a level 4 area. I will warn you, it's going to take a while to get through these. Also worth having a bit of a notebook in hand when you come to this server, so you could sort of take notes, or maybe just a notepad up on your desktop, because these keywords, by and large, all have very specific sort of ramifications on what they do to the dungeon levels. So keeping track of these things could allow you to make for some interesting combinations. Okay, it's a level 7 area, but by level 10 you could feasibly solo this. I'm not going to run the whole thing, but I am going to go through the field so you could see sort of what I'm talking about here. As you get in, you're greeted by this screen with some text. You get that nice little message out of the gate. And now you know there's a bit of an uneasy feeling in the air, and you can just sort of get a nice sense of lore, that little bit extra added immersion in. Get our buffs at the ready. Force fields are fantastic for that because you can actually go ahead and get set up in a relatively safe space. The best thing about the level range we're at is by the time you're done with the buffs, you still have enough SP to charge forward and start a combat. That was both of our spells in action, and as you can see, being slightly over-leveled here, with this OP weapon and high-level armor, not too many enemies are going to be getting through us in terms of sheer damage. But you're going to see some interesting layouts here. Like the wooden boxes back to back, you have a spring of mist up here. The portals, as they're aligned in this next room, you almost never see a room laid out like this. And at this level range, you're going to be fairly comfortable handling it, but at the same time still be able to get a decent amount of experience. It's not going to be anything huge, but it lets you sort of get the feel and flavor of this and sort of give you a window into some of the more creative things that can be done with the area server. Custom dungeons are always a fun thing. I remember coming into them as sort of a fun surprise. And it is nice to see what work people put in. Here we've got some song lyrics popping up. This is a field I have covered in full, I believe a couple times, actually, on the channel. And it is in one of those all-time favorite sort of categories for me. Another nice thing about an area like this is you know you're not going to be pressed too much on consumables. So it's a good place to stock up on items and really make a bit of gold back after you've had some purchases or maybe a run or two that were a bit more costly than you anticipated. Really about the only thing that comes close to the flavor you're going to get out of a custom dungeon like this are the seasonal events, which are broken in ways that have yet to be wholly figured out. See, here we've got the room suddenly full of static. You can just play it through your head as you're playing through here. Got a big ol' empty room up there, probably tiny apple or two, but grunty food is for another time. That is another thing I would suggest here, and I'll have to cover it a bit later in the taping. By this point, you really want to get a grunty. I've yet to do it. There you see our Knight's Blood really coming in handy there. Between that and the level disparity, we only took 2 damage off that hit, and just real quick regen back. And again, we're making short work of this. Just for fun, I want to see what a melee attack does here for us. Getting a solid 5er. I can't really be too mad at 5 damage there. An error message to end the field. And we're not going to cover the dungeon portion of this, just something I wanted to show you real quick is out there. There is a spreadsheet available, MU's made available for people to peruse at the lia.fail site. I will link that if you need help remembering the address. It's actually the message that pops up when you log into NetSlum proper. Without going further, I'm going to go ahead and back out. And we're going to a different server here for reasons I will explain thus. So the reason at this level I wouldn't recommend running heavily on Shining Darkness is if you do end up using health drinks or Mage's Souls, because of the root town it's at, you're going to have a difficult time replenishing here. Because while there are healing elixirs and Artisans and Emperor's Souls available, they are rather expensive. And again, gold mileage will vary depending on how much resources you have to give to your character and how much running you're doing and how profitable that running is. So I would recommend, especially in the first 25 levels, sort of sticking to servers whose root town gives you the best chance to restock after. Fortunately for 10 to 25, there are plenty of options. Basically, any server that's going to give you Mac Anu or Dunloriag as a root town is more than fair game. I'm partial to Mackerel server because I've been partial to Mackerel server since 2020. Shout out to Venus, the host of Mackerel and V's Place. Trying to get all of my credits in here. So we're just going to get through here. Once again, holding on to the levers and the moon for a later time where we may sub out one or two of those spells for status effects as need be. We're not quite to that point yet. At this point in the game, pure damage is our best friend. Always loved the feel of Dunloriag, but the layout is a bit of a pain. It is very spread out. Actually, I think Carmina Gadalika is probably the best laid out hub town as far as convenience of movement. You can get to what you need right quick and in a hurry. It's all in that main street setup where everything is nice and accessible. It's a very minimalistic approach to the design. There isn't really a whole lot to that town, but you get the nice Law and Order skyline in the background there, and you get shimmering metallic jello water. Here in Dunloriag, you get to sort of take a look off in the distance and say, hey, didn't an episode of Sign take place like right over there? Here you've basically got the unused portion in the anime of Dunloriag, more or less, for the game use portion. But we're going to head to the Chaos Gate here. And we're level 10. Level 30 is going to be a struggle, but you can push a good 10, 12 levels higher at this point. I think 24 is going to be a bit beyond us, simply due to one-shot potential. 14 is going to be a cakewalk for us. So here's a 17, and that's even a bit too easy. There's a nice level 20. That's where we want to be. Generally speaking, you can get through areas about 10 levels higher. That's about optimal for difficulty, while getting the most XP for your time. I'd still recommend partying up in most scenarios if you can. But if you've kitted your Wave Master out, the ability to attack at a distance, having your defensive safeguards, you should be able to make a 10 levels higher area work. The damage portion is not going to be an issue for us. Again, Dark History is going to do so many good things, just off of sheer ability. See, we're up against Fire Witches here. Caster type that is directly opposed to our element. I didn't think they had a fairly good chance at surviving a Ru-Rom in the first place. And then the elemental resistance being opposed just put it that much further. Bit of a lag there. Guessing that's just a server hiccup. Maybe it's my internet. I don't know. It seems everything here is stable. We'll just kind of hope for the best. The occasional disconnect may happen. That's just warts and all of the game. There you could see taking down a couple general armors with a monster in the back that I didn't see. And we are getting fantastic experience here on this field. We're already up to 300 experience into level 10, and at least half of that is just the stuff we've picked up in our couple minutes in Mackerel's server. We still picked up a nice amount of experience, and I stopped pretty close to just ticking level 10. I want to say there was maybe 5 experience on this character to the next level when we started. It may have been even, I don't know. I'll have to take a look back at post and enter in where we were when I look back at that status screen. Not trying to get too exotic with the spells, because my SP usage personally is going to bend a lot to efficiency. Again, I am intentionally playing a suboptimal build. One, because I know it can be done to a high extent, and 2, because it's going to give me unique advantages later on. Could hear another general armor sort of stomping in the background there. And they just keep on rolling, so I'm going to try and group these two together if I can. Nope. Not really. Okay, finally got to that point. And it sounds like we got a Harpy visiting, and we do. Time to rebuff anyway. You could see that even with our safeguards in place, the Knight's Blood's still active. Just trying to set that up took a good chunk out of us. Wandering Fire Witch almost took us out before we had a chance to really recover things. Always important to be alert when you're in the field. And as you can see, just the matter of taking those enemies out using just Ru-Rom depleted us to a point where I had to sort of pause for a second between Rig Geem and Rig Same to get the proper SP up. Not a problem most Wave Master builds will have. I would say that's really more of a me problem than a you problem in most builds. But going 10 levels higher, you should reliably pick up a level on a full clear, potentially 2 if you start out relatively close or it is a deeper dungeon. There is a keyword that I'm going to give you here. This is a pro tip. If you're looking to run a deep dungeon and gain a ton of experience in the mackerel server, in the C words list, you want to use the keyword whale shark. That is going to give you a 10-floor dungeon. Just be careful on your A and B words, because yours truly has run whale shark to the point where it's probably one of the more boosted keywords. I don't know if it personally affects the overall level of the area, but it is a consideration worth making. Heading to the dungeon now, and we're just going to take a quick peek at the status screen to show you we just about doubled the experience from last check, even a little over that point. And again, it's just taking down enemies nice and quick. This is kind of a big swing versus big swing sort of deal. But we're more than equipped for what they've got for us. Important thing here is you're going to start in this area really running into enemies like the Menhir that have the resurrect ability. If you can, take out enemies that can raise others first, and if you can't, I would try and time it for a simultaneous kill as well as possible, or at least do my best to hit them with a spell immediately after an enemy falls. In the hopes that it may stall them out. Every now and then they're going to break through and get that resurrection off. But you never know. You could hit them in that moment. Every now and then they'll be attacking you at the moment another enemy falls. And that may buy you all the time you need to get through that. Where you know you're safe is when you see the experience total flash up on the screen. At that point, the monster is off the board entirely, cannot be rezzed. So keep an eye for those XP totals. Here's a situation where we have 2 Menhir, so I'm just going to angle things so that my second Ruram hit the one that took the splash damage off the first. Balance things out that way and get that simultaneous kill. Now, random dungeons like these, procedurally generated, are probably going to be your best bet at this level range. However, there are some farming dungeons you could potentially go to, and if you really want to power level, there's still the option of offline mode. But if you're playing in offline to gain that experience, I would actually suggest you start taking a look at where you are in the story and what party members you have that you kind of want to stick to as your favorites. Because they'll be quickly to the point where they're gaining the same amount of experience you are. And you could level them up and sort of make a really prime offline leveling group. Again, the advantage there is if you run into an enemy where you may not have the best magic set up, you could just sick some frontliners on it. Also, you do have that buffer of 2 NPCs in the party if things turn sideways to get a quick res in, whereas if you're soloing online, one bad hit could spell doom for your run and down a level. At this point, losing a level isn't life-threatening. If you're truly worried about it, I would suggest making sure your save is up to date and saving after every time. Also, I would recommend, as frequently as you can, making a backup of that save file. Be it just copying the file to another physical card, or maybe like making a copy of the memory card into a folder. Again, disconnects can happen, freezes can happen. If you're playing on the computer and you accidentally bump the escape key, this could all be potentially a loss of experience. Or if you make the mistake of logging back in offline mode, potentially all of your gear. So having that backup in hand cannot be underestimated. Using angles and using the camera to your advantage is a big part of playing Wave Master. Here we're going to stick to the right side and just make sure that Menhir is out. If we wanted to be really efficient with our SP pool, we could have just jumped back and forth. Got our level up there, so we're nearing 60 SP. By this point, most Wave Master builds have already crossed that mark. But we're also up to 240 hit points. Even off smaller enemies, we're still getting a quality 15 experience. And pushing further than 10 levels higher isn't going to give you a ton more experience in most cases, but it will greatly elevate the risk of damage. Here you can see our power has gone up on spellcasting enough that we can actually get through a Menhir with one Ru Ram if everything goes right. That's just none of the hits missing. Again, trying to jump that out of the gate. Now here's a fun task. We have 3 Menhir, and you can almost resign yourself to that res coming. There's almost no way you're going to stop a res from 3 Menhir, but being able to keep that multi-target damage going really mitigates the difficulty of that. If you're running something that has, like, Zot spells, for instance, with single target, that battle could be a great deal tougher because every time you get one down, there's another Menhir to drag them back up. The summons are also a natural bonus there because they're really good area of effect at all of their stages, but again, they are massive SP consumers. I think the level 1 summons themselves cost 50 or 60. Final floor here. There we took the Fire Witch out first, and it was just a waste of a spell. Though we did get some fun numbers the second time, hitting for over 100 per pot. On that Ru Ram meant that it only needed to hit twice out of all of its shots. And that time we were able to sneak lethal damage into the second Menhir before it could res the first. Treasure chest giving us a nice boon to our future gold supply and also a good chance to replenish some of our SP pool before we finish off these last couple portals. Didn't quite angle that right. And we ended up targeting the resurrected Lambada knife, which was the closest enemy on screen at the time of the cast. Had we gone a little further off, and that Menhir would have been the only visible enemy by the camera, then we would have hit the Menhir primary, which was my goal. Just didn't quite get the angle correct there. So there are ways in situations like that where you can play smarter, not harder. Right now, again, thanks to Dark History, I've got more than enough firepower to overcome a tactical mistake like that. Here I'm not terribly worried about the Fire Witch. It is firing into our weakest element. But we know our magic stats are more than high enough, and the Vakdon that hit us was for minimal damage, already recovered by HP regen. Did not realize this was a chronicling dungeon. Urgent battered catfish, yeah. So fun fact, the chronicling keyword normally can't be changed in an area server. Here it has been changed to the word urgent, and now I know. So I picked up a speed charm for good measure, and that's keyword tip number 2 for Mackerel server. If you're looking for the timed Hero of Zeet runs, you want the word urgent in the A column. So a bit of an underwhelming reward for this, but a nice surprise nonetheless. And today I found out. Now, after that run, we're about a third of the way through to level 12. And making through these levels is just going to get easier as we go from 11 to 20. Things will just be that much more castable. And your gold supply should really be getting up to a solid amount through these levels, as long as you're not pushing too much or running too straining a setup. If you prefer life on the edge, again, there are options available for those high output spells, but they're going to be rather taxing in this level range. However, one thing I did want to show you here, sort of going against the grain of my previous advice. This is going to require some guides that are available if you perhaps ask around the Netslum Discord. That will also be linked in the description. I will have to pull that off of an old video to put that link there. But we're going to go for Bearcat server on this one. And I'm going to pull off, in a separate window, I'm going to pull up some of the rare item guides. It's not going to appear on screen here. But I just have some PDFs that have been made available by the people who made them. And I'm going to pull up the PDF I have for the Bearcat server rare item checklist. And this is an area where you could, again, really make efficient use of how this game works by looking for items that could benefit other characters while looking for an area that you could handle yourself. For instance, taking a look here, there is a level 23 rare heavy blade sword available from the keywords Dark Napping Cat. So let's go ahead and put that in, just so you could see an example. It's going to be a level 26 field, which is a little higher than what I suggested. It's 15 levels higher, but you have some more leeway with a farming server, assuming that you're not completely against the wall against whatever enemies are here. So a lot of times you'll actually want to head in with a higher level character, one, to make the farming simpler, and two, to sort of get a feel for what is there, and if it's a beatable enemy with your lower level character, maybe head in after and use it as a quick way to gain experience. Farming dungeons are generally set to the same groups of enemy. Occasionally it will vary to 2 or 3 different enemies throughout the dungeon, but they're usually pretty consistent mobs of the same enemy coming out of each portal. You don't see too much variance or random happenstance. Another thing you'll notice is a good deal of them are just real quick linear dungeons. Now this first one I'm going to be a bit more to the cautious side on, because I don't know what we're dealing with here. Just let this portal open. And we've got some metal goblins. So we should actually be fairly okay. We'll see how much these things... Yeah. They could still do a fair bit of damage to us, so we don't want to get too reckless and start crashing the portals in the middle for that big area of effect. But if we let them come to us, we're going to get 17 experience per pop. These are double portaled rooms, so we're going to get, I believe, 3 or 4 goblins per. And this is just going to make leveling super quick for us. Each room is going to give us well over 100 experience at this point. Now again, there is a risk of getting wiped if you're not careful. So this is definitely something you want to stay on your toes with. If you're really feeling sort of eager for a riskier style of gameplay, you could actually run right into the middle of those portals and potentially get 6 goblins with that first Ru-Rom. Okay, button slip aside there. And that was 100% what that was. But that's what it's going to look like when you try for that risky style of play. As you could see, the downside of it is you're opening yourself to a melee attack from any of the surviving goblins. So just food for thought when you go do this. And again, leveling won't take long in the least. Also going to pick up some really nice treasures through this. And maybe you run into something that's a fitting, sort of suitable replacement for the item you're farming for. Which again, you could trade to that other character or this character if this is the one you're farming for. And the stuff on the FC Hucker or F Chucker file, as I like to call it. Again, a big thanks to NC Dyson for coming up with the tool. That's been covered earlier in the video. Feel free to look back on that. I would again caution not getting too transaction crazy. Like a solid multi-item transaction from character to character is really as far as you want to stretch it. I have had situations where items have disappeared on me. So just a fair bit of warning again with that. As with all things Fragment, it is a lot of bubblegum and duct tape stuff. It is ingenious and clever and wonderful, but not without its inherent little quirks and dangers that may not be immediately apparent. A lot of times you want to avoid hitting those portals in dead center because you'll hit this weird area, especially later on where the portals are a bit more spread out, where you'll only get 4 enemies instead of 6. So you kind of want to hit either the top of the first portal or the bottom of the second. But yeah, you can see we're racking up equipment like crazy, we're racking up experience like crazy. And there are fountains aplenty, all sorts of symbols in the area. That's going to allow us to keep those statuses nice and high. Got a nice little boost to our water element, which is huge for us at this point. Also picked up Rig Game out of that symbol up top there, so that was 15 SP we didn't have to reuse. Which at this point is a whole other spell and probably a second with regen. Now we are to the point where I could shortcut Foul Wrap, and I don't know why I didn't do it already. You'll notice I'm not shortcutting Rip Main, because the casting animation in a game like Fragment where everything has to be pinpoint accurate is just too long a time to wait in those crucial situations. You could perhaps do it with a heal if you're at a safe distance, but Resurrection is one you really want to get off at a moment's notice, so the Resurrect item is really the only shortcut you need. I do know some people have shortcutted it twice, my apologies, for characters where they had gotten used to having Rip Main available. That way they have the Resurrect at a moment's notice at both button presses, and it doesn't throw them off how they were previously playing. Again, another matter where those shortcuts are all personal preference, and maybe the most optimized having a different skill or item in every slot isn't what you prefer. Maybe you're really hammering home one spell, you get a bit jittery in combat, and you just want that shortcut set for an entire block so that you know, for instance, whenever you hit R1 hand, that's the skill you're getting. There is our second level up. And yeah, like I said, we're certainly not going to be losing a whole ton of lifetime off of gaining these levels. Really, the first 25 levels in Fragment make this game sort of feel like a cakewalk. If you can party up, it's all the better. One, for the camaraderie. I feel the social portion of this game is really a shining gem. Capping parties at 3 and not making it too difficult. Here we want to go straight up for our demonic sword. Always important on these multi-item farming areas to be looking for directions throughout. Now, if you're just looking for the experience, full clear is the way to go. But again, if you're running this for the item, be very, very on the lookout for directions. This is a simpler sort of dungeon setup. Some of them can get pretty intricate and involve multiple directions through multiple floors. Now, we didn't pull our rare here. We pulled an Earthian sword. However, we did pull a massive level 40 heavy blade in the Corona blade. Insert 2020 joke here. Goodness knows we did back then. But it's one of these single target heavy blades that just has such good abilities. You've got 2 really good attack skills, Ap Corv, which can increase your attack, and a massive 26, which doesn't seem huge, but at, again, lower levels, when you're looking at a melee class like Heavy Blade, that is a big addition. So this is probably the point in the video I am going to back out and do the chucker stuff. It will appear earlier in the video due to my commentary, but this will be the item we'll be using for the setup. Now it's time to use the Sprite Ocarina for real, and just sort of head back. Okay, so we've picked up some interesting information about grunties here in the BBS, and this is, I think, a direct thread you could find in Infection as well. Some great information on where to find different grunty foods. Always make sure to clear this stuff off, so you know an offline story when you get a new post that may be pertinent to the story, and also that's going to be really relevant information down the road here. So here we have a post from Tsukasa to Elk specifically, referring to Mia, which is going to be the leg of the offline story we are on. Apologies to those who were hoping to not be spoiled on a near 20-year-old game's offline story mode on this. But this is going to give us the go-ahead to get to the Theta server, which is as far as you need to progress to get into raising grunties, something you really should have for online play, especially party play, for convenience of travel, and also as a nice little safety precaution if you find yourself outgunned in a field and need to get somewhere safe to maybe res. So we're going to switch server over to Theta. There are guides out with the specific recipes, the foods and quantities you need to raise grunties into specific types. Each grunty will give you different tradable items. However, you only need to raise one to get the grunty flute. They are usable in fields in both online and offline mode, as I believe I stated last episode, and if not, I certainly just did now. We're going to go for the easiest grunty there is to raise, which is the noble grunty. You can't do it wrong. Here we have some information about grunties you can get from the grunty shop guy. Again, apologies about the pointers being slightly off here. But you want to come to the little grunty here. And it's going to keep asking for food. It's going to get increasingly specific as it gets older as to what foods it wants. By older, I mean bigger. I'm just going to go ahead and feed it a ton of whatever I've got available. Give it 10 Ono melons. That should raise it considerably. Get a nice little munch and belch sound for those in the ASMR style viewing. Going to do 10 golden eggs as well. You could see already it's asking for piney apples specifically, but it's not going to turn down golden eggs. And now we have ourselves a noble grunty. Again, you could go through your playthrough without it. I certainly wouldn't judge if you did, but especially if you're heading online and you plan on partying up with people, I think it's imperative to just sort of have every precaution accounted for. I'm just going to go to a field real quick and show you how this works and some of the unique advantages. If you come to the field and you choose, it's going to be the key items category when the menu is properly set. The grunty flute, you can summon your noble grunty. You not only get this jaunty tune here, but you've effectively locked out combat mode. These portals will not activate as long as a grunty is out and about. On a similar token, I'm just going to get away from combat real quick here. Reactivating our grunty and going right into battle here. These guys cannot attack, which is just kind of scatter. As long as there's a grunty on the field, the monsters literally cannot battle. Additionally, you just use circle to summon the grunty, X to dismiss it, but each grunty will also have a triangle abilities. Most of them hunt down portals in the field or the dungeon entrance. The noble grunty will hunt down grunty foods. So if you want to raise more grunties, get a variety of them going. Useful because I do believe they have slightly different ratings and things like speed and handling for the grunty racing, which I believe is available in offline mode, though the prizes may be slightly different. And if not, then it's good practice for IMOQ, where that's definitely a thing. The grunty races through root towns. And as I said, they all have a small variety of items for trade. Here you could see some mimics that will not be getting to us, because we're going to go to a nice safe point here and just sort of dismount the grunty and get back to town. But I did want to show A real quick raising of a noble grunty so you know exactly how easy it is. That took, what, 20 grunty foods for me that time, just a quick 10 and 10. And now we've got a grunty for life. So I hope at this point we've got a pretty fair establishment of what this phase of the game looks like. It's going to be a lot of procedurally generated dungeons, perhaps some low level farming, but completely viable. Again, assuming you could get a strong staff out of the gate. I'm sort of lucky in the sense that I was able to farm for Dark History, and that my Wave Master has such a natural affinity to it that there's really no reason that that wouldn't be my staff of choice. Even so, Groovy Stick is going to be a fantastic alternative, albeit not with that insane punch, but it will be a sizable upgrade and give you multiple elements of feasible spell to cast multiple times at this range. We've gotten to level 15 at this point. The next 10 levels are going to be much the same. As you could see, our stats are still pretty out of this world. We're nearing 50 magic attack already. We're up to 47. With an accuracy of 62, the elements, again, strong due to the high level gear. But this is basically where we're at. It's going to be 10 more levels of this. The next episode we're going to pick up is going to be 25 to 50, which is going to be a fun episode all in of its own. Just sort of saying goodbye to this first phase of Fragment, the first few, like the first 50 levels is one game, and then the struggle begins once you get past that halfway point, specifically in the last third. But we'll touch more on that later. Hopefully you're enjoying this series thus far. If there's anything specific I haven't covered, feel free to let me know. Could be coming up sometime in the future here. Also, if you would like to see a series like this covering the melee classes, which I will probably group into one or two, be it just melee in general, or one for heavy armor classes and one for medium armor classes. Because honestly, there isn't a huge variance in how I personally approach those. Perhaps for others it's a different story, but for me, I've never felt there's too drastically different an approach, aside from specific items you may be looking for. As always, there's a slight variance if you're looking to make specific builds, but overall, 5 of the 6 classes will play more or less with some thematic differences the same. You could potentially play more of a hybrid class out of 3 of the classes. I say 3 because I've incidentally made a bit of an argument for Blade Master as a hybrid class by once again not playing it as intended, I don't think, over time. But Long Arm and especially Twin Blade really lean themselves into being all-arounders, where you could sort of tilt it to either a melee or a magic build. Twin Blade, I would say, is probably the more apt at the magic side of things than Long Arm. But Twin Blade is the universal all-arounder and is perfectly viable as a melee-centric build as well. In the meantime, this has been episode 2 of my New Game Plus run. I thank you for watching, and take care.